Chapter 11, April 12th. I got back home and got on my grind immediately. I sold my new disc for $10 as opposed to my mixtape, which I'd been selling for $5. Once people saw I had a professional disc that looked just like the ones in the record stores, they gave up the $10 as quickly as they had with my mixtape when my father's name was on the front. This time, it was all me. I sold close to 1,200 copies hand to hand over the next couple months. For the third time, I was headed back to Def Jam. This time, Leo Cohen was working for another label and Jay-Z was now the president of Def Jam. I got upstairs with ease using the same format through the messenger's entrance. Def Jam had gotten a lot of upgrades since the last time I was there and looked way snazzier. Once I passed the huge frames of artists like DMX and Ja Rule, I got to the offices. Within minutes, I spotted Jay-Z's right-hand man, Tata, sitting in an office having what looked like was a business meeting with two females. I poked my head in and said, "Sorry to interrupt, my name is JayFlo. I was just handing out my new CD. He said, "JayFlo? All right, JayFlo. And just how the fuck did you get in here?" "Oh, nah, it's cool. I just wanted to give you this and be on my way." He got up from behind his desk, walked past me out into the hallway, and asked again, this time to everyone within earshot, "How the fuck did he get in here? This is the #1 label with the #1 artist. How the fuck did he get in here?" He was flipping. He looked at me, snatched the CD and said, "Give me this shit. I ain't even mad at you. It's not your fault." And walked back into his office. I went back to the elevator, and as I stood there and waited, a security guard and a police officer walked up behind me and just stood there, waiting with me for the elevator to come. They rode down with me without saying a word. They followed me off, handed me a sheet of paper, and told me if I didn't sign it, I would be arrested on the spot. I read it, signed it, and they led me out of the building. The paper stated I was banned from the building for 1 year. If I even stood on the same block as Def Jam, I'd be arrested. I went from confident to discouraged in a matter of minutes and rode a depressing train ride home. Trial and Error was the name of my album and the best way I could describe the life I was living. Quick sidebar. Due to some disagreements, I won't say on whose part. I'll just leave it at this. I don't stamp Trial and Error. I don't use those beats, and I'd appreciate if the person didn't use my rhymes. If y'all want to hear the lyrics from Trial and Error is now an a cappella album called Once Upon a Time in 2005. Back to the book. Around this time, I got a call from my brother Keith, which was strange because he'd never called me before. I'd always called or visited Pam, and that was how he and I stayed connected. When he told me something was wrong with Pam and she was in the hospital, I shot right up. I got Lil Jojo and myself dressed and headed to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, I sat in the lobby for about a half an hour. I knew Pam was upstairs waiting. I knew it. I felt it. I got upstairs and waited in the hallway another 20 minutes. Keith's sadness over the phone gave me a feeling that it was something serious, but I rushed off before asking anything. Before I could make it into the room, Nina spotted me and called my name. I looked at her and just put my head down. She came over, hugged me tight, and held on. In our embrace, I asked, "Is she gonna be okay?" She released me with no eye contact, wiping her running nose, and said, "I don't know, JoJo. It doesn't look good." Through my welling eyes, I asked her, "What happened?" The doctor said she had an aneurysm. She was at home with Swan and he rushed her over here. They did an emergency tracheotomy and she's on a breathing machine. What? Nina? Yeah, Joe. It's bad. She took my hand to go inside, but I told her to give me a minute and I'd be in. She said okay and walked inside. Man, I swear to God, this is so hard, man. This is so hard. I give credit to people. This is a sidebar. This is not in the book. I give credit to people who write books. You know, I'm not an author. I wrote this book, but I swear to God, it'd be like reliving this stuff all over again, man. I will proceed, though. I will go on. I will continue. I will finish this. I will get this done. Back to the book. I waited a few minutes and walked in. Lil JoJo following behind. I looked at Pam. Pam's always been very light-skinned. She resembled to me the singer Sade. Laying there, she was pale. Her eyes were closed, sunken in, and she wasn't moving. I walked over to Pam's mother, Miss Howell, gave her a hug, and introduced her to Lil JoJo. I thought to myself how she'd already lost her son, Kevin. Sleep in peace. And Pam needed to pull through this for her mother's sake. I grabbed Pam's hand and called to her. Ma! Ma! Pam, it's me, JoJo. I'm here. As hard as I tried not to, I put my head on her hand and started crying. Nina and Miss Howell came over, rubbing my back. And by the time I'd gotten up, Nina was handing me tissues while wiping her own nose. Miss Howell was just telling me it's going to be all right, comforting me when it should have been the other way around. She didn't need it. She was the strongest person in the room, talking to Pam as if she was wide awake, wiping the excess saliva from Pammy's face as she fondly called her daughter. I stepped out of the room to get some air, gather my thoughts, went to the cafeteria and bumped into Swan. I could tell he was still in some sort of shock, so I tried to offer him some of that comfort Miss Howell offered me by telling him how Pam spoke highly regarding him. We spoke a little, and after a while, I went back into Pam's hospital room. I stayed a little while longer, spoke to her, held her hand, and told her I would be back to see her. I couldn't take it anymore. I hugged Miss Howell, Nina, gave Pam a kiss, grabbed Joe's hand, and headed out the room to leave. Halfway to the door, an almost 3-year-old JoJo pulled away from me, ran back, and hugged the corner of Pam's hospital bed. You see, that's exactly what I mean about him. Pam had only seen JoJo a few times when he was a baby, but he felt the energy in the room. And showed everybody just how large of a heart he was carrying in that small body. I gotta say again, I give credit to people who do this, who write these books, especially autobiographies. This is not in the book. When I was writing this book, it was like going through all of it all over again. And even right here, recording this, it's like, ugh! I just want to get through this. Like, whew. Back to the book. The next time I went to see Pam, she hadn't gotten any better. I talked to her, then started talking to Miss Howell. I saw Pam when I looked in her face and heard Pam's voice in her speech. Nina was there and Cherie, Pam's older sister. As the conversation went on, it seemed personal. So I left and went to the cafeteria. When I came back, I was ready to go. Nina told me the doctors weren't giving good news about Pam's condition. They had no hope of her recovering and felt the family should prepare to pull the plug. I was devastated. I walked into the room, gave Miss Howell a hug, and she asked if I was leaving. I sighed, yeah. And she had that same supportive face saying, okay, well, come back. I'm sure Pammy will be glad to see you. I said nothing. I went over to Pam, put my forehead to the side of her face, and whispered, thank you. I love you. Kissed her cheek and said goodbye. I'd had enough. All I could do at that point was hope for the best. The worst happened. I didn't go to Pam's funeral. I'd said goodbye to her attached to that machine. Seeing her not alive was out of the question. Pamela Howell, sleep in peace. By New Year's, Rita was already 6 months pregnant with our daughter. My last album, Trial and Error, was a huge success in my eyes. Friends, family, and strangers were all fans, and I'd made tens of thousands off the disc over the course of 1 year. I wanted to make a new album, but the new standard was mixtape, then album. Soul Survivor, Volume 3. The truth is in the proof. I'd done all my pre-production, so I'd already heard the mixtape. It was my best one yet. I was in the zone. It ended up taking 2 weeks. When I got home, I was greeted by a sexy 7-month pregnant Rita in a white negligee with hearts all over it. A matching thong, red heels with clips running up the side of her lace see-through robe. It was Valentine's Day, and her plan worked like a charm. I squeezed whatever I could reach and kissed her like I missed her, because I did. She took off laughing, trying to get away, telling me, No, wait, that's later. She sat me down in the living room and bought me a well-dressed plate, lit a candle, sat with me, and asked what I thought about the food, because I'd only taken a few bites. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. She had makeup on. She never wore makeup. She'd done her own hair, one side cornrowed, and the other side Shirley Templed. She'd done it like that once before, and I complimented her, telling her how dope I thought it was. I was locked on her. She smiled, picked up my fork, and put a scoop in my mouth. I kept my eyes locked on her. She smiled, got up, grabbed my hand, and said, Okay, come on, and walked me into the bedroom. I followed that big wiggly butt as she paused midway, pointed at the food, and said, You better eat that. I quick nodded yes, guiding her into the room. The first thing I saw when I walked into the hospital delivery room was my daughter's face over the doctor's shoulder, with his back facing the door. Jakaya was already about 3 minutes old, and I'd missed it. Rita called me, and I'd gotten there as fast as I could, but my daughter was already there among the room's occupants. I smiled, looking up at her as her tiny head leaned over the doctor's shoulder. She looked me up and down, then turned her head while rolling her eyes. I thought, did I see what I just saw? I was taken aback. What I got from her look was, oh, him? This is the father? Sidebar, I'm telling y'all, I swear on everything. I swear on my sister Shaniqua, like, I walked in the room. This is a baby. I opened the door. First thing I saw was her little face in that curly puffed afro. And the doctor had his back to the door, and her head was like over his shoulder. And that's the only thing I saw was her head. And I swear to God, she looked at me. She looked up and down and just rolled her eyes. That's my word. Like, I know it's crazy. Yo, I'm telling you, man, it's crazy. It's crazy to me too. But that's what happened. Back to the book. I walked in checking on Rita, then my daughter, and they both gave me attitude. I apologized, explained myself, and they forgave me. I held Jakaya Sadler, born April 12th, 2006, fed her, stared at the female version of my son's face with a full head of hair perfectly puffed in a curly afro, and was ready to immediately begin serving my little princess. We got our daughter home, laid her down on her stomach, stood side by side, and stared at her. She must have sensed it because just then she got up on her hands and started swiveling her neck slowly left to right, scanning the room. With a confused look, I asked Rita, "Didn't the doctor say she'd be doing that in a couple of weeks?" With a shocked look, she laughed and said, "Yeah." And that's how it stayed. My daughter wanted to be acknowledged. She walked early, talked early, was always the smallest thing in the room, but you couldn't miss her. When she would drool, I'd lay on my back, hold her up in the air, and let the spit drip into my mouth. It tasted exactly like Poland spring water. I parted with her shortly for the first time, and it was hard, but I had to go to Satani's to go pick up Jada and Lil Joe. I had a family to support, so I got right back to work. As a father of 3, plus a woman, the mother of my children, depending on me, there's really no room for "I don't have it." It's either you've already got it or you're just on your way to go get it. That's if you want a fully functioning family structure. I kept up working at the driving school, winging it with my fathering skills, and Rita did what she could as a mom of 3 babies. There's a reason I believe through all these instances of curves and circumstances that Rita and I were forced into each other's lives. Maybe one day that reason will reveal itself. Maybe it already has, and I missed it. Maybe it is, and I'm just not getting it. Reta'd come from a turbulent and dysfunctional background, and even though I was raised by my mother, and my father's an international celebrity, I was as, if not more, screwed up than she was. I couldn't be what she needed me to be, just like she couldn't be what I needed her to be. We did our best, but it wasn't enough because we just didn't know how. Rita and I slowly fell apart after the second baby, and I'd stopped making music, but so far, I'd done either an album or a mixtape every year since 2002, plus the album I did with my dad a couple years earlier than that. It was 2007, and I didn't want the year to go by without a JayFlo offering, so I paid for studio time, put together a sort of greatest hits CD using the songs I got the most comments about, added 3 new tracks and called it JayFlo.com to steer people toward my new website. Rita and I broke up, but I knew I still had to be there for my kids no matter what. And I still am. February 2008. Rita and I stayed separated, but we did everything for the kids and took care of them like we were still a family unit. I'd even stay over sometimes. Around this same time, my father reaches out to me wanting me to do a song on his upcoming album called The Bridge. I hadn't seen or spoken to my father in years. I was skeptical, but I guess the pain of our last interaction had worn off, and I said, cool. I'd never stopped rapping. It was who I was, and this was an opportunity. I didn't take it that serious because it concerned my dad, but I was going to do it, give it my all, and whatever happens, happens. I drove down to my dad's house in Central Islip, Long Island. To look at his wall in his office, you'd think he was this involved, family-oriented person. He had pictures of me, my siblings, and all his grandchildren. The pictures to me looked like perfectly shot photo ops. No warm, kick-around, average day pics, and I owned no pictures of him. I guess he felt if he couldn't see us in the flesh, at least he still gets to see us. I went to the basement studio, sat down, and he played me some beats. I couldn't front. He'd gotten a lot better at beat making. Track after track for me was thought-provoking, so I knew he had something. I picked this soft, slow beat because I'd written this song called Woman, which he refuses to give me a copy of or anything else I've done with him, films at shows, etc. And it's like this was the beat I'd been hearing in my head to it. I laid it down and everybody that was there loved it. It was time for me to go, but before I left, he played a beat he had prepared for some other dude. And as soon as I heard it, I knew I had to be a part of it. I said, "What you doing with that one?" "Nothing yet." It was the opposite of Woman. This beat was hard. I started writing right there. I wanted to have 2 different types of songs on the album if I could, and I told him so. He said, "Well, let's see what you got." I went in the booth and ran right through it. The hook was already on it and ended up being called "I Got Something to Say." We walked upstairs to the main part of the house, talked for a little, and I was ready to go. I told my dad, Ricky and might feel left out if you don't include them somehow. He had no response except light laughter. He then said to me that he was glad I was still doing my thing and I should realize that if I was serious about getting into the music business, I was going to have to make a sacrifice. He then said the sacrifice I had to make was being around y'all. I nodded my head in agreement, but when his statement settled into my brain, I was confused, and my whole life flashed before my eyes. If I didn't know before, I knew right there and then I'd never put anything or anybody before my son and my daughter. Months later, one day I went to the supermarket and there it was. My picture in the XXL magazine and an article all about me. Georgette Klein, a writer for XXL, called me and conducted a phone interview. My father's album was about to drop. He'd previously told me about the phone interview, wanted to give me some tips on how to conduct myself, and gave me a few suggestions. By now, it was 2009, and one of his suggestions was for me to lie about my age, which I don't blame him for saying because at the time, I was 33. And if you go by the industry standard, I'd already aged out by at least 10 years. I didn't want to tell any lies though. The business, I felt, came with enough stress. Remembering and trying to keep lies in order was an unnecessarily added burden. I'd rather just be myself, accepted or rejected. I was so proud of what I'd accomplished. To get to this point of having my musical contribution spoken of in an international magazine gave me a great sense of validation. I had a good amount of money saved up, and with the publicity of my album in the XXL, I'd gotten the motivation to finally finish recording my album, Son of a Legend. From my SOAL Survivor mixtape trilogy. I had an ill idea for an album cover too. I went to get 2 t-shirts made. One for me and one for my son. Black tees with white lettering on the front that said, "The Son" on Lil Joe's shirt and "The Legend" on mine. Everyone looking at the cover would have thought I was talking about my dad by calling it Son of a Legend, but when you open the cover, you see Lil Joe sitting on the throne with his shirt that said The Sun, and me standing beside him wearing my shirt that said The Legend. I was hyped. Only thing left to do was make the cover.